So, welcome to Servant Leadership Library, the podcast where we dive deep into the art of science of leadership with focus on people, process, and technology. I'm your host, Nicholas Paulukow, CEO of One to One Incorporated, a leading managed IT and security firm. This podcast is dedicated to equipping you with the insights and strategies to grow as a servant leader and to transform your business. Today's episode features the incredible Beka Shea, an executive advisor at Culture Index, co-founder of Seven Figure Foundation, and a passionate advocate for building exceptional teams. Beka believes that every business challenge boils down to one of three things: people, process, or technology. Hire the right people, she says, and they will take care of the rest. So Beka breaks down into four core beliefs: serve first, results that matter, focus on strengths, and further together. So with a wealth of experience in scaling businesses, maximizing ROI, and creating synergistic teams, Becca is here to share the leadership journey and strategy for designing and developing elite teams that hit targets faster and have fun doing it. So whether you're an aspiring leader or a seasoned executive, tune in, join us today, here to explore servant leadership and transformation in your business. So let's get started. Welcome, Beka. How are you doing today?
Awesome. Very excited to be here.
That is excellent. Well, why don't you start off today, telling the audience a little bit about, how you got started in your career, and a little bit to your path to where you're at now.
Okay. It's been a winding path, so buckle up.
I love it.
When I was in high school, I wanted to be a Navy pilot. And
Ooh.
so I started on a journey of how could I get there? And I knew a couple things to be true. Number one, I wanted to be an officer because that's the best bet you have to become a pilot. Number two, to be an officer, you have to have a college education. And number three, there are certain degrees that you can get that will put you higher up on the list to become a pilot, to get the slot that you want when you get commissioned.
Okay.
So I went to school for mechanical engineering on a military scholarship to Worcester Polytechnic Institute. I did consider going to the Naval Academy, but my dad actually was like, it'll kill your spirit. It'll kill the spark that makes you you. Don't do it.
Okay.
And he wasn't wrong, and I'm glad because I met my husband in college, and then I became an officer for 4 years. Unfortunately, my eyesight disqualified me. And it's interesting because before we started recording, we were talking about the journey, right? And when you're in your teens and your 20s, and like, all I can say is get moving. Like, get moving, pick a direction. Nobody ends up where they thought they were going to be, but it's important to have a direction. Because as you start to move, it opens up other doors that you weren't ready for before. And if you just stayed still, those doors never would have opened. So I digress there for a minute.
Oh, I love that though, because, right, they say when you provide value to people, if you want to provide more value, you need to meet more people, right? Like you have to connect. And so, but like what started you in that excitement of wanting to be a pilot? Like that is pretty neat. Like I don't hear many people say from a young age, I'm going to be a pilot.
Yeah, I don't. My dad was so my dad's mechanical engineer, Navy. He was a navigator, and he's definitely
Okay.
my hero. So that's kind of where that seed got planted. And then his eyesight disqualified him from being a pilot. And it's funny because I came to this fork in my career where they said, you can't be a pilot, you can be a navigator. And that's kind of where our paths diverged, my dad and I, because I, at that point, had met my husband. We were thinking about getting married. I wanted to have kids. I did not want to go back to sea 30 days after I had a baby, which was what the leave policy was at that point.
Okay.
And so my last duty station was an aircraft carrier. It was so cool. I mean, I tell listen, if you are a young adult listening to this and you don't know what to do with your life, just go join the military. They will give you skills. They will take care of you. You will get to experience things you never could have anticipated. And 4 years goes so fast.
Wow, that's awesome. And so do you like what kind of spurred you from, you went into the service for those 4 years, and then what happened after that period of time? Like, did you get into mechanical engineering or?
Mhm. Yeah. So then I got out and I decided to use my mechanical engineering degree. I really wanted to move back to Boston, which is where all my college friends lived. So I ended up
Ah,
getting a job there. My husband got a really cool job there, and we did that for 7 years. And when my second daughter was born, we moved down to Florida because I wanted to be by my family.
okay.
And and I didn't want to raise two babies in the city. I mean, city life and babies are not a great combination, I don't think. And so uh, his company was opening up a manufacturing facility down in Tampa, and they said,
Okay.
if you come help us start it, we'll move you down there. You can still make Boston wages. My company, I was working pretty much remotely at that point anyway, because
Okay.
I would travel all over the U.S. to the job sites, um, doing energy efficiency work,
Okay.
and so I would go into like these VA hospitals and these military
Mm,
bases, mainly working on federal government facilities,
okay.
figuring out ways. They spend like $5 million a year on utilities, right? And
Wow.
so if we can leverage data and some improved efficiency and some capital expenditures, we can save them like $1 million a year. And
Mm.
so my company did this thing called Energy Savings Company, where they would basically help the organizations finance all these capital improvements, knowing it was going to save them
Ah.
money on their utilities. And then they would pay off the loan over 5 or 10 years.
Oh, that's
It
neat.
was
That's creative.
very cool. It was just like cool
Yeah.
business model, cool work. I was LEED certified, just really awesome stuff. And then while we were in Florida, my third daughter was born, and I was traveling all the time because I was working on federal projects. And so literally I'm
Mm.
in my third trimester. This will be my third kid under the age of 5, and I traveled 6 out of 9 weeks.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was like climbing a ladder up to the roof of a building with this huge belly so I could go see the air. And this is the best part about corporate America. At this point, like, men aren't sure what they can say to women, like what's allowed and what's not allowed. And so I know all the men around me were like, "Oh, I don't think she should be climbing pregnant up onto the roof of this building." And I was like, "You're not going to tell me what to do."
Oh, goodness.
Oh,
Well, as you
so
kind of moved into that, like that career path, right? Like leadership, was leadership different for you when you were in the military, like in the service, compared to like corporate America? Like, help us kind of manage that, understanding. Like, did it have a
oh,
different
yeah,
level of leadership for you?
such a good question. So I always say that those two jobs, the engineering and the leadership, kind of set the foundation, in the military,
Mm,
set the foundation for where I ended up today.
okay.
Because the military they value leadership at such a high level, and they really teach you that leadership is a learned skill. Like you might have
Mm,
an inherent amount of it, but they are constantly providing you mentors and opportunities, and they're
mm,
forcing you to upgrade your leadership. Like they don't just say, "Ah, you screwed up,
ah,
I'll handle it from here." They're like, "Oh, you screwed up, go fix it, I'll
ah,
watch." You know.
okay. Okay. I love that.
Um,
And now,
yeah.
what with the intro that we did, you've had such a career, right? So many things to unpack here. But you also, like, as of today, that we all understand, you really kind of, in a way, study people, right? Like,
Yeah.
from the way that you're kind of utilizing what you're doing today and comparing it to the philosophy at which the military utilized, like, how do you combine them? What did you find as common denominators, or how does that relate into the workforce? We all say that maybe, your point is like everyone can be a leader. And then in corporate America, we're like, wow, like, there's doers and there's leaders. Like, so help us kind
Hmm.
of bridge that gap. You know, educate us a little bit on that.
Well, I think so. After I left the engineering space, I started my own company. I didn't want to travel anymore, and I actually was part of this leadership cohort inside the organization. And so they'd given
Ah,
me access to all these tools. It's a like global company, and I
wait,
stepped
wait, wait,
away.
wait.
But
So you're going to save time, start a company, because that will lessen the amount of hours that you have. I got you. I did the same thing, but
yeah,
for me,
totally
that
worked.
apparently people don't see that the same way.
I will say it wasn't necessarily. First off, I didn't intend to start a company. I wanted to flip a house. I thought that would be cool. and I
Ah.
didn't want to travel. I wanted to stay local. And so I flipped a house, and then of course it got out of hand. I just was like, well, I'll flip 3 this year and 6 this year and 12 the next. And like before you know it, I've done 200 real estate deals, and like that's kind of our part of our personality is
That scorecard.
never enough, right? Like there's always more. Um, and so somebody introduced me to this tool called Culture Index, and it's a behavioral analytics survey, which
Mm.
basically is like measuring people's inherent traits. And I was like, oh, now this speaks to the engineering nerd in me. Like I can get data on people. I can take this soft, fuzzy concept of people and actually make it actionable with insights here that are strikingly accurate, like surprisingly so. And the Navy had taught me like, well, man, you can always become a better leader. So now you've got some data. How
Mm.
can you leverage this to be a better leader? And so I grew that company and I helped grow a second one. And then Culture Index reached out to me about 2 years ago, an advisor, and said, you should come on board and be an advisor and help other small businesses do what you did. And I was like,
Mm.
and he said, the caveat, he said, it will be the most fun you've ever had. It won't even feel like working, which is not entirely true. He lied. Matt White, you lied to me. um,
I
because
mean,
there's
probably
good stuff.
doing the work is fun, but then you have to
Oh
do
yeah.
business development and yeah.
Yes. I hate biz dev, but I love the work I do. And so it's worth it, right? But so what we do is we get these insights into people, and the science behind it has been around for over 100 years. Like nearly every personality tool is built on the same science. The question is
Okay.
just how do they show the data and what do you do with that data? And a lot of times, unfortunately, people will get the data. It's a pre-hire assessment. They put it in a box. Nobody ever talks about it again.
Mm.
And so I often say to people, it's like, that's like asking me when people say, what's the best behavioral analytics tool? I say, like, what's the best CRM? Well, it's the one that
Right.
gets used consistently. Like, nothing can
Mm.
happen if you have a tool and you don't do anything with it. So what we do with it is like we say, well, how are people naturally wired? What's their leadership kind of bent? And you run on EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating
Yep.
System,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
and so they talk about LMA, lead, manage, hold accountable. And that's kind of the goal of the leaders in an organization. And I think that there's a third piece in there, which is coaching.
Mm.
And when I started really digging down this path of like leading, well, leading is casting the vision and seeing around corners and seeing the big picture and that like kind of macro approach to like what problem are we solving and how are we going to solve it, and then like getting people on board with it. Managing is like what are the tactics and the tools that have to be done consistently well over time.
Mm.
But I think the third piece, coaching, is like how do we develop people, like pour into them and have that personal
Right.
relationship to make them a better version of themselves.
Mm.
And it just so happens that this maps nicely to behavioral analytics and these three main motivational traits. And so I was like, oh my gosh, light bulb.
Time to take
um,
over the world with this new data.
yeah, yeah. And so I've just been chewing on this thought lately about, we talk about in, there's Harvard-backed research that shows that there are three main motivational traits for people. The first one is like the desire to win, to like to
Mm.
hit your goals in the future. Like I'm aggressive, I'm competitive, I'm assertive. I have a goal and I am gonna hit it come hell or high water, right? And so I call those people my sharks. Like that's one main motivational trait for people. Those are my sharks. And then there's another main motivational trait, which is I value above all, it's not winning, it's strong relationships. So
Mm.
for me, my value, my confidence, what I bring to an organization or to a team is the ability to pour into people and to build these really strong relationships.
Mm.
And those I call my sunshines, right? They make the fun happen. You enjoy working with them. They're nice people. They know how to change the energy in a room to make it better. Um, and then finally, I've got what I call my shepherds. And these people, their confidence and their knowledge and their drive comes from getting it right. So they are
Mm.
driven by perfection and quality And so that's your wife, right? Like,
Yeah, oh, it sure is. That's why I'm giggling. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Don't
So
ever
how does
sneak
she show
anything
up?
by her because she knows the
Right.
data.
To me, those are more my, taking this back to this idea of leading and vision, coaching and management.
Mm,
I really think that you will naturally gravitate towards the one that aligns with your prominent traits. Like if you're a shark, the casting the vision and getting people excited about the future comes easily. If
mm-hmm,
you're a sunshine, coaching people and pouring into them personally and helping
mm,
develop them, that comes really easily to you. If you're a details shark or shepherd person, then the knowing every little step that has to be done in order to deliver a high quality product and holding people to that, that's the management piece.
mm.
And sometimes you can have more than one. Like I joked with you, like you're a friendly shark. You have your main thing is like you want to cast that vision. You've got big goals. You're going
Yep.
to hit them. You want to go, but you can also pour into people and build relationships. That's not your main drive. So you can have like a little bit of a secondary drive,
Mm-hmm,
which means you're good at leading, you're good at coaching, but where you're going to struggle is the management, like
mm-hmm.
holding people to the details and the tactics.
Right.
And to be an exceptional leader, you really have to dial up all three, or you have to figure out with the ecosystem where all three are happening. Maybe it's not
Right.
you, but you
Right.
have to empower somebody else to be that manager.
That's right. Yeah, I think
So,
that's so well said. Just even knowing you for a period of time and knowing the work that you do, that analogy is striking, right? Like I just learned something even more by listening, right? And I was like, that makes a lot of sense why there can be also conflict, right? Not negative conflict, but conflict of like, can't you see the vision? Like, why do we keep talking about people? Like, and why is the
yeah,
break off all the time? Like, why do we care that it's written down so perfectly? And I think what is um, a realization for those probably that are trying to figure this out in their ecosystem is that we're all there successfully as long as we're in the right place or right seat to do it. And I think for everybody listening, Becca said to one of our team members, said, "Oh man, you're acting like an angry version of Nick." And this
yeah,
person was trying to fit into the seat but really wasn't their natural behavior, and it was killing them, right? They wanted so much to deliver successfully, but in reality we kind of say like set the person free, right? Like let them live their
mhm.
true life. And I think this allows those that need a little bit more concrete way to look at things. It allows you to be a better leader and manager, I believe.
Yeah,
Would you say that?
yeah. And and also I think we have a bias in this culture about leading within the corporate arena. Like everybody feels like they must move up to management.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reality is, like, if you're going to make that leap, you have to understand, are you interested
Right.
in dialing up your coaching and your vision? Or, like if you're a shepherd, are you really, and you're good at managing a process really well, are you really interested in
Right.
caring deeply and personally about other people's development and
Mm,
being the one responsible for casting the vision and getting everyone excited about it? Because if you're not, then you're going to feel like a fish out of water as you move
mm.
into that role. And I think there's some acceptance that we need to have around like, hey, I do what I do really well.
Right.
And I'm good with that.
Right. Well, that's interesting you say that because a lot of the times we don't seem to be okay with who we are, maybe because we don't
Yeah.
know who we are, right? Like it feels like
Yeah.
we're out on an island. And when you start to learn some of this and you realize, well, maybe I'm just with people that can either build me up or it perceivably feels like they're bringing you down when in reality they're not, right? Like, do
Yeah.
you find that there's like shepherds might frustrate one of the other air, a shark or someone like that. Now, I don't believe it's intentional, but talk a little bit more
Yeah.
about that. Like, how do you utilize these concepts to like shepherd, no pun intended, like a cohesive team?
I wish there was a pun intended. Why did you not intend that pun? um, so I think you hit it. It's the journey starts with self-awareness, right?
Mm,
What are you naturally gifted at?
mhm,
Because that's the type of work that will light you up and you'll enjoy doing. And, we've all had a job that we hated. And you come in and like the first hour, you'll drag your feet. You're just like, I'm gonna play on my phone or I'm gonna read my emails. You're just like avoiding doing the thing you
Yes.
want to do.
Oh, good point.
Versus if you like what you do and you feel like you're naturally suited to it, you're going to come in and you're going to get right to work. In fact, you're probably going to work early. You're going to like be excited about it. And so
Yeah.
I see so much attitude about, oh, I hate work. And work is a necessary evil. Like you cannot pay your rent and eat food unless you have a method of income. You must
Right.
do something. But what if you could do something that actually aligned with how you're wired. So it wasn't a chore. And some people work to live and some live to work, but like what if you even like work to live and you still enjoy that 8 hours or you don't
Yeah.
hate it? That would be
Yeah.
nice.
That would be nice. And I think, do you find that, there is a level of exhaustion, I guess, to that too, right? Like,
Yeah.
man, I think I love it because society tells me I should do it, but
Mhm.
maybe I don't, but I need to. I have children, but I'm exhausted every night that I come home. Like, how do you unpack that? Like, how does what you do help others kind of remove the burden from that? Like, is that
Mm.
just because they're just an exhaustive person, or, tell us a little bit more.
So if you're having the Sunday scaries every week
I
and
love
you
that.
don't want to go in, chances are that work is not filling you up, right? It's not bringing you life. And
Mm,
um, the question is, what would you be more suited for? And it's interesting. I had a call with a client yesterday. And while we do focus on really developing a great leadership team and helping you become the leader that your team needs, like this applies to people, all people. And so she came to me and she said, I have an 18-year-old niece or like foster niece coming out of the system. She doesn't know what to do with her life. I gave her the
ah,
culture index. Could we just talk through some things that she might really enjoy doing? Because she doesn't even know where to start. And so we looked at it and we were like, well, teacher, like this, she's a really
mm.
patient, friendly person. She really cares about other people. Like she's an others centered person. And she's the opposite of a shepherd, whatever that is, like very freewheeling and nonconformist. So, like, there's no one right way to do things. And her profile is like a really good teacher profile. Like, I'm going to be patient
Ah,
and friendly, and I'm not going to harp on you for getting little things wrong. Um, so we talked about that, or I was like, this person also usually does really well in account management, customer
mm,
service. Like, so I think there are ways if you start with that journey of self awareness, and then if you're willing to accept the mirror that's been held up, and if you're willing to accept the reflection, then you can start to say, instead of saying, like, I wish I looked different, I wish my nose was smaller, or like, I wish I had, a mustache like Nick, like, instead of just saying like, no, that's not who I am. These are the
mm,
assets I have. How can I maximize them?
ah.
I just think that that's a much better path towards fulfillment and happiness.
I love it. And so I dare to jump into this subject, but my kids end up being guinea pigs for me. That's a bad word, right? But I really realized at a young age that there is a significant amount of parents that are like want to push their kids into one role or another, which is good or bad, right? But I realized of studying the work that you do that I was like, well, how can I apply this to allow them to do their passion, right?
Hmm.
And it's been fascinating to have them at like a high school level take these types of assessments because one thing I identified is it helped with communication and
Hmm.
allowed them to identify that they are who they are and they can be confident in that, but realize even in the family unit, for my example, 3 out of my children respond similarly in some areas and not in others. And then my daughter, my 3 boys, and then my daughter had an aha moment of, oh man, when you all are talking to me, this is why it happens this way. And now can kind of give her a permission that we're all coming from it from a different direction. So I think it gives a lot of, I think there's some fear to push potentially your children into something that maybe sets them up to have the Sunday,
Hmm. Yeah.
blues that you said, right? Like
Yeah.
that hurt my heart when I heard that but I think it gives a lot of power outside of even the work. How do you find that? Like, I mean, you mentioned that just from a client utilizing it from a child perspective.
Yeah, I think the journey I see people go on is like some people are ready to receive it and some people aren't. So I
Mm,
always approach it with if somebody takes the survey, and for your listeners, I am happy to run them through like a 20-minute review of their survey. They take the survey and they come to me, and I try to be very gentle with like, hey, here's what the
mm,
data says. Is this accurate? And I can usually tell in that survey review where they're at on their kind of personal journey. Um, and some of them will be like, maybe, or like, yes, that is me, but I'm not going to do anything about it. Right. Like,
yeah.
like I have chosen what I've chosen to do and I am happy. And I'm like, well, the data is telling me you're really unhappy, but okay, like it's fine. And then there's people who come in and they're like ready. They're on this journey of self-awareness and like kind of self maximization. And they see it and they're like, this is so cool. I understand why I keep running in, especially CEOs, right?
Ah,
I understand why I keep running into the same wall. I mean, I have one client, she's like probably the most raving fan ever. And she's like one of the top 5 most successful women in Philadelphia. And she came in and she said, this opened my eyes to the challenges that I kept having over and over
mm,
and understanding how I can approach them differently to get different results.
mm,
And so like I love that's the most fun because it's like, all right, if you're ready to hear it, here's how you might not be a great coach, right? Like
right,
you're good at the leading and the vision, you're not a great coach, and managing people is really tough. Okay, like let's talk
right.
about how we build a team around you to fix that. And so like those are the best kind. That's the journey of like, I don't believe it, or I believe it, but I don't want to do anything with it, to I believe it and I am ready to use this to make life better.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think you're kind of hitting on points of also like leadership journey, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
there's this kind of like, I'm 16 years old and I'm the manager of this ice cream shop. That's kind of like, a delegated authority, right? Like I'm a boss, right? But what you're
Yeah.
talking about, it seems like is kind of that journey that everybody goes through. How do you, for listeners that are like, well, Becca said a minute ago, if I'm not this vision person, maybe I'm not a leader. You didn't say that, but like from the standpoint of the
Yeah.
different categories, like, do you find relevant to being a shepherd or a shark? Like, are they all leaders?
I think there are different ways in which we lead. So I actually used to do a podcast. I did CrossFit for a long time. And I did a podcast with the CrossFit coach,
You
and
darn
he's a
high
shepherd.
A's, always trying to accomplish something.
I know. Well, I loved his approach, and he was obviously a leader in this gym. He was a senior coach, phenomenal at his craft. He was great
Mm.
with people and great with people in like coaching the details. So he was a shepherd all the
Ah,
way.
ah.
But he really cared about people's development in this area. So he
Mm.
was so good about taking the time and just I really admired him. But he'd never be the person standing up in front of the room and being like, come on, guys, we're doing this. It was
Ah.
much more like that quiet, unassuming lead through example. But he still cast vision. Like he showed people
Mm.
what was possible, and he was constantly encouraging people to like. He showed vision through his journey. Where he's like,
Mm.
I was a skinny kid who, misfit 15 years ago, and I found it, and now I'm like going to the CrossFit games, right? Like
Ah.
so he would cast vision in this one specific arena, and he did it by knowing what the journey looked like and
Mm.
encouraging other people to go on.
Mm.
So I think you can be a leader. It's just how you lead is going to look different. And you do have to turn those things on. Like even the coaching and the personal interactions did not come naturally to him, but
Mm.
his profile is like Becky's. So
Mm.
like he would turn it on in a one-on-one setting, but
That
he had
was
to
it.
challenge himself to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. So like if you take that and you also one of your areas is farther together, right? And
Mhm.
from a leadership perspective, when we talk about farther together, how many like individualistic leaders do you see become successful? right? Like
Mm,
maybe like a high person, your category that was like, hey, they lead with people, but say they're
yeah.
leading with people and coaching, but it's for their own benefit compared to the greater good. Do you see that? Talk a little bit about like the further together. What does that mean,
Mm,
to
yeah.
you? And kind of how do you define that? Because a lot of people are like, well, I work in an organization and we're doing things together. But what is your definition of that? Like the farther
So for
together.
me, farther together means you have natural gifts and you can try to be everything to everyone, but that's a recipe
Mm,
for burnout. And
mm,
the saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
ah,
So the idea there is, it instead of you trying to be everything to everyone, why not surround yourself with people who are uniquely gifted to do the
mm,
things that you are not?
mm-hmm,
And by doing so, you can build a much more robust organization. You
mm,
can build a healthier organization, a happier organization,
mm.
right?
Hmm. I like that. And from another area, like you talk about like scaling a business just a minute ago, or that friend of yours in Philadelphia. And how do like what do you define as like servant leadership? Like how does that impact, some are like, well, servant leadership really is not going to hit your successful, revenue or ROI.
Mm.
Like talk from your perspective as an individual, but also maybe from the work that you do. Like what do you define servant leadership to be kind of in your leadership journey?
Yeah. I honestly not sure that I have ever seen, well, no, I won't say that. I will say most of the successful organizations that break through the scaling barrier have an element of servant leadership because
Mm,
the opposite of servant to me is like that ego boss, like it's all me
mm,
and no one
mm,
else. And if that's how you lead an organization, you will naturally hit a ceiling, a breaking point, which you cannot bust through because people won't stick
mm,
around.
mm,
Eventually, you'll alienate your top performers because they want recognition for what they bring to the team, right?
mm,
So I think servant leadership is the only way to really build a long-term business. Now, with the caveat of you still have to be the leader. Like you can put
mm,
other people first, but if you're the person at the top of the organization or of the department, everyone is looking to you for guidance and for
mm,
direction.
mhm.
And so you can't abdicate that and say like whatever you guys want to do. Like it's about you, not me. It's like no, you have to say like here's where we're going and I couldn't do it without you and I
Mm,
value you and what you bring to
mm.
the table.
I love that. And you talk also about like people and process and
Yeah.
technology. And like how often do you see like a separation or like a silo around that? Like how can leaders align to those kind of like strategies, kind of in their work?
Mm. The times when I see process and technology fail, which I've seen often, is because there isn't one clear leader and champion of it in
Mm,
the organization. They're just checking a box. We need a new CRM. We need a new IT system. We need to document our processes because
mm,
EOS told us we have to document our processes, and we're checking a box. If somebody isn't, if somebody on the team isn't passionate
mm,
about the future implementation of the technology and the processes, it will die. And I'm
mm.
sure you've seen that.
Yeah, that's well said. And you also see a lot of organizations where they put someone that might know the details in it, but hasn't seen the vision. And so they don't actually work together. And in turn, it fails because it can't scale. It like works for the moment. So that's
Mhm.
interesting how you approach that. That's neat. And so it sounds like maybe like a shark had a really great idea and tried to implement it on their own without one of those shepherds. Is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. Or they just task the shepherd with it,
Ah,
without making sure that the shepherd actually agreed with it and felt that it, was bought into it. And so then
ah.
they're like, "Fine, I'll do it because you made me do it." But that's it.
That's it. And I'm not going to be happy about it.
Yeah.
Well, what's one piece of advice that you'd give leaders who are just beginning their journey, right? Like you talked when we started about your journey, and that was quite unique for you. But those that are kind of starting their journey, what advice would you give them from what you've learned?
Um, you will hit leadership ceilings. Like it is a constant, you go up a hill and then you hit a plateau and you have to break through that ceiling. And your ceilings, there are some that are common from, oh, this is my first time leading people, like the first time I have to hire someone, or the first time I have to fire someone,
Hmm.
right? The first time I have to do a performance review. You hit these things, you're just like, oh, I just don't know. Okay, I guess I'll do it. There's some that are common, and there are some that will go along with how you're wired, that are more likely that you're more likely to hit than somebody else, right?
Mm.
And so my advice is don't be scared of those ceilings. It's part of the journey. As much as you can open your eyes to when you've hit one and then go find a resource that
Mm.
can help educate you and show you the way through it because other people have been through it. That's probably my biggest piece of advice.
No, I like that. And it's a valid point. I learned the hard way that I thought that others weren't ever going through what I was going through. Like, right, when I was in my 20s, I was like, they have it all figured out. So like,
Uh-huh.
I'm the only one screwing this up. And that's absolutely not true. I think it's really lessons learned from even hearing you is where's that mentor, right?
Mhm.
Like my journey, I would have like, wow, having that coach like 20 years ago probably would have been better than trying to figure out how to just solve this on my own, right? Like muscle and feel through it is kind of something that I would probably change for myself. Uh,
Yeah. And it doesn't always have to be like people will say, "Oh, I don't know where to find a mentor." Do you know how
right,
much I've learned from podcasts like this
right,
one? I
right,
just go to the podcast app and I'm like, how to hire someone, right? Or
right.
like how to fire someone. And I just listen to other people talking about it.
Yeah.
Mm.
It is not fun to be a leader that has to do those things. And people that aren't in it don't, they're like, well, listen, I just like the coaching and mentoring. Well, unfortunately, it's a package deal, right? Like
Mhm.
you're gonna love things and you're not gonna like some things. And I think that's a hard thing when people get into leading and managing. They're still trying to figure themselves out. And now they're trying to figure out everybody on their team. Which I think this is a great what you do. The Culture Index really gives a great tool for those that are learning the ability to be a little bit more subjective to a little bit more of data in front of them instead of the emotions that seem to bubble up, especially when you're a new leader. Do you find that when you teach people in this practice, or would that be incorrect?
Yeah, the data is so helpful, but you also have to go on a journey of internalizing and referencing the data. I mean, we work together
Mm.
for a year at a time, and so like this week, I'll have these open 2-hour sessions for my clients. I'm like, just bring to me whatever challenge you're having. And
Mm.
it's not like you never, once you have the data, it's not that you never have challenges with people.
Right.
So we bring them, we put the surveys up and we say, all right, tell me about the challenge you're having. Look based on their data. Why do we think this is happening? And how
Mm.
can we solve this problem from from an analytical standpoint instead of an emotional standpoint?
Right. I love that. All right, it's story time now. You have to have a lot of stories. So tell us
What
like a
thing?
real like a success story in this journey that you've been on.
Well, I think this is the most recent one. I was talking to a client who's been with me for, is in the second year now. And when he first hired me, often what happens is people are like, I need to get better at hiring and managing people. And they're like, this seems like a really cool tool. And then they're like, I can do it myself. And I'm like, okay, I'll be here when you're ready. And so 6 months later, it's usually about 6 months, they come back and they're like, I made a bad choice and that hurt and I
Mm.
don't like it and I don't want to feel that way again. Please help me. And so this client came on board. He was in a tough spot. I think just he was exhausted and
Mm.
tired. And he's the number one sales rep in his organization. He's been there for 30
Mm.
years. And he's like, I have got to crack the code on sales reps.
Mm.
Um, and so we went through it and we figured out what the right profile was. And we went through the hiring process. And he is a good student. He just said, tell me what to do and I will do it. And he did it. And so I asked him, we just had a meeting and I said, what's the range of your sales reps? He said, well, got one guy that does when beforehand, one guy who does 700K in contracts a year. I look for them to do like 1.3 to 1.5 is their target for a sales rep. My best sales rep does 2 million. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, let's try and get more towards the 2 million. So we went through the hiring process. This guy's been there for a little over a year, the guy we hired. And I said, how did he do? It's like reckoning time, right? And he said, yeah, he sold 2.5 million.
Wow.
And
That's
he's
cool.
like, some of it he lucked into and I helped. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Or he's also got the right wiring for it.
Mm.
So to me, that's the fun part is like, I know which way people are wired. And I was like, just trust me.
Yeah.
For what you need, just try it. You know, what do you have to lose? You've banged your head against this wall 15 times.
Right.
Just let me try.
Right. Like give a different perspective. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, yeah.
That.
So
What do you think is the most difficult roles that you find to hire for? Is there any?
hmm. I don't think there's the most difficult. It is believing the data. Well, the most difficult part is that sometimes you can have a hypothesis about what a role requires,
Mm.
and so then you go get that person, and it turns out after 6 months that the hypothesis was wrong. Like what you thought this person
Mm.
was going to be responsible for
Right.
and doing every day. So then you have to go back to the drawing board and say like, well, why didn't it fit? What do they actually do? So
Mm.
that's the challenge is understanding that this, while there's science to it, it's also an art form.
Right. Yeah, it requires constant reevaluation, I guess you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. We
Like I always say,
realized
the
that with
dots
our
don't
teams because
lie, but
everybody had a different
no,
opinion, you know,
yeah,
of where they're coming from.
yeah. And there's no one right way
Mm.
to do a job. There's usually a couple profiles that will excel at it. And so then it's understanding, okay, well, this person might do it this way and this person might do it this way. They will both be effective in the role.
Mm.
But how they do it is going to be slightly different.
Right. Huh. Well, as we kind of wrap our session up today, what are your like closing comments or feedback that you'd like to give the audience?
I really think that it's the end of the year. I don't know when this will be published, but every year I like to sit down at the end of the year and do this goal setting worksheet. And I've refined it over many years. And what I find is that we often don't give ourselves enough credit for how far we've come and for the good things that we do. We're some reason always programmed to like belittle ourselves and just focus
Yeah.
on the negatives. And so one of the things I love about it is I start with like, well, what were your goals this year? What did you accomplish? What are you proudest of? What lessons did you learn? And I think if you can just stop before you start thinking about where you're going, if you can just take a minute to
Mm.
kind of bolster your confidence by running that exercise, you'll realize, man, I've come a long way. And
Mm.
that makes you excited to go further.
I love that. I love that. Now, we ask this every time. Do you have a favorite book right now that would be relevant to our audience that you would share that has impacted you?
I have a few. One that I've talked about a lot lately is Radical Candor.
Oh, yes.
Um, and it's funny because that has stuck with me for years and years and years. Two pieces of it. Can I share them?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The first one is giving feedback, this situation, behavior, impact model, where when something goes wrong, our tendency is to like deliberate on it and like, then it gets blown down a proportion. And she's like, no, just if you like this person, if you love them, if you're coming from a place of love, as soon as they do the thing that caused an issue, give them this feedback immediately, quickly in this framework. So that piece of it. And then this idea that people can be rock stars or superstars, where do you remember this piece too?
Yeah. Hmm.
And it's basically like level of ambition that you can be really good at your job, but be in a phase that requires that you're not super ambitious. Maybe you have new kids at home or you're going through a divorce or there's some illness. Like there's just something where like you're good at your job, you love what you do, but like you're not gonna be crazy go-getter. And then you've got that phase where you're like, yes, I want your job, man. I'm coming. Let's go. And the idea that you can switch back and forth between these depending on what's happening in your life, that really stuck
Mm.
with me.
I love that. That just resounds in my head. There's a gentleman, an executive that works for a large organization, and he has the opportunity to take the CEO role. And
Mhm.
he's like, not in this time frame. I want to be home with my kids. And I thought that that was really respectable. He goes, well, don't forget, I do have a plan. I am the
Yeah.
COO, so I can position myself to make sure that that is still an option. And I was like, oh, that's very strategic of you. And I think you're
Yeah.
absolutely, that's a very good piece of feedback because we always think of things potentially so linear, right? Like
Mhm.
if we're dropping, we're going to fail all the time, right? It's just kind of a
Mhm.
season for everything. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, Becca, you've inspired us quite a bit today. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Servant Leadership Library. It's a true pleasure to have Becca with us today, sharing her passion for people, her leadership, her philosophy, and her actionable insights on building and leading exceptional teams. Now, don't forget, Becca reminded us the critical importance of focusing on people, process, and technology, and that when you hire the right people, they'll take care of the rest. So, reminder, here are four fundamental beliefs: serve first, results matter, focus on strengths, and further together, our powerful framework for creating a lasting impact as a servant leader. As you reflect on today's conversation, think about how you can apply these principles to your own leadership journey. When can you do today to serve others, deliver meaningful results, leverage strengths, and foster collaboration? If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you, your thoughts and ideas. Reach out with any questions or suggestion, for future topics and guests. Thank you again, Becca, for joining us and inspiring us to lead with purpose and passion. And to our listeners, thank you for being part of the Servant Leadership Library. And until next time, I'm Nicholas Paulukow, reminding you to lead with service, focus on strengths, and go further together. Stay tuned for more conversations, and we'll empower you to transform your business and your life. Till next time.